All right, thank you all for being here. I call this meeting to order at 5:30. I'm gonna roll through the agenda, which would be roll call. Alejandro. Here. Eric. Edgar.
He's excused.
Edgar's excused. Monica.
Here.
Dane. Here. Audrey.
Here.
Josh. Here. Martin. Here. Lacey.
Here.
Cece.
Here.
Greg. Here. Jess.
Here.
I'm here. Joey.
Present.
Alex. Cool. We'll move into the approval of tonight's agenda, February 5th. Please look over it. Eric.
I move to approve the agenda.
Just seconds. Discussion. None. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? So moved. Look at the minutes from last week, which was January 29th. Please go over it. For some questions and concerns. Eric?
I move to approve the minutes.
Motion on the table. Just seconds. Discussion. Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? One. So moved. We'll move on to reports. I don't really have any share report right now.
The only report that I wanted to make sure we talked about today is that we have $92,183.17 left in the budget for the remaining of the supplemental requests.
We do have a plan for discussion on budget discussion under new business.
Yes.
Did you hear anything back from the West Centers?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Did you have anything else that I can open up? Yeah. So we did get a response, and I guess I'll just read it. Lauren Hibbs, who's our executive director there, gave us a very long response back to the question. So I'll just read the whole thing to give you the context. So S&A committee members, thank you for your consideration. Curiosity about the West Side Student Life S&A definition and proposed language change. I'm pausing there. We just got this today. I will forward it on to all of you for those who are not auditory. The question you were faced is one of the changing world and new model of business. These considerations will no doubt continue in your professional careers. The short answer to your question is that the requested definition is intended to serve and provide access to all CWU students, regardless of the location or modality. S&A funded activities and services by nature are not exclusive. However, the design and access to those services differ quite dramatically for varying populations. For example, a CWU Ellensburg student may have the opportunity to attend a CWU Linwood event, but the program design, time, location, accessibility may present a significant barrier for attendance. University Center programs currently enroll 1,240 students across 8 locations. University Center coursework is delivered in-seat, hybrid, and online. These students all are assigned to a specific University Center location. The University Center S&A funds are intended for specific programs and services designed to target these 1,240 students. The current West Side S&A funding that they received and staffing have not been designed to differentiate service and program delivery to the online population. Access to online services and programs is notably different. From fall 2018 to fall 2019, CWU's online enrollment grew by 7.1%, or 699 students. Fully online students are a differing population of students beyond the 1,240 University Center students previously identified. This is a complex issue to understand, and we recognize you seek to make an informed decision. And then she mentions that she welcomes the opportunity to share more with us as they are coming in person on the 26th when they're going to present on campus. So that was the answer to the question. So going back to that, there was a request for them on a definition change to their base funding, which is just the description of it. It's not changing the funding, but it is changing the description instead of saying West Side Centers. I don't have it in front of me, the specific request of what they wanted me to change it to.
It's just inclusive of the East Side satellites too.
Yeah. the only part is if you want to approve that change, the committee would have to make a motion and say that we're in favor of changing the wording of their current base funding.
Barry?
Is that germane now? I make a motion to change the wording of their, how their base funding.
Description.
Base funding description, yeah.
Dane seconds. Discussion. Greg?
We're changing it from what to what? Or is that what we don't know?
Lacey?
Basically, the current definition only talks about West Side centers. The proposed change definition talks about all 8 centers, which includes the East Side centers as well.
Any other discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? So moved.
Okay.
That ends report. I'll open up the floor to public comment. First call. Anyone in the galley? Comment. Seeing none, we'll move on to the next part of the agenda, which is old business, supplemental funding request voting. Request 2032, which is the cross-cultural leadership program for $19,150. I'll open up the floor to discussion. Feel free to look over the agendas from last week. Eric?
The Cross-Cultural Leadership Center here on campus does a phenomenal job of bringing volunteer opportunities, bringing and students together to create a community beyond just what the school does. And I think it's very important to support this organization, the Cross Cultural Leadership Program, and CLC in general. So I would like to make a motion to approve $19,150 for their funding request.
Motion on the table. With no second, the motion dies. I'll reopen the floor to discussion.
What's everyone thinking?
Thank you, Josh.
This is
You know,
Alejandro.
So, I'm kind of conflicted with my thoughts on this one because this is like a group of student leaders that all do wonderful things, they put on wonderful programs and such. But that being said, when we're told, to treat groups equitably means like to kind of give opportunity to those that don't really have opportunities. And so, comparing kind of like this group to like say like a group who is going to like a conference for like the very first time, this group of students, like I have no doubt in my mind that they're, going to go on to be community leaders. I mean, they're already community leaders. So, I guess, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I can't really say that it's equitable to kind of give opportunities for leadership to those that already have those opportunities for leadership. Yes.
Eric?
that's a fair point. But I also want to remind everybody that we've been approving, I'm going to say the majority of the funding requests since the beginning of the school year for the full amount. So if in previous weeks, I wanted to cut money for one, and everyone thought that that wasn't the right idea. So we can't have it both ways, as far as I'm concerned. We either need to be equitable for everybody and limit money since there's only $92,000 left, or we need to spend it till it's zero. And that's, I don't think it's fair for us to have it both ways. And I was probably wrong last week to make a suggestion for half of the amount of money, but, so that's kind of where I'm coming from.
I appreciate you saying that, because I think that was part of our discussion at least 1 or 2 meetings ago, was are we going to be consistent in the way that we're voting on all of these requests? And I'm the new guy here trying to figure out, okay, how do I vote? And to be consistent is exactly what you just explained, is without regard to what the current budget is. And maybe that way of thinking is, well, it is kind of a first come, first serve, right? Until the money's gone. I don't know, it's a challenge. This is a challenging, but how else are we going to, we're going to pass this and go on to more, how are we going to make any decisions on how we're going to vote these through if we don't have some kind of consensus on being consistent in how we're voting, or if we all agree we can't be consistent, let's change the way in which we have been thinking through this, and let's cut everything in half, or whatever the decision is of the group. It'd be good to have some thinking, at least to help guide me in thinking through this as a newer member on the group. I'd appreciate the help and guidance, since they are student fees, all of your fees that we're voting on.
Well, and I think it's important that you all remember really what you are looking at is 2 things. One, is this allowable? Which I'll tell you, and I think hopefully Lacey and I have already stressed this. We're not going to put anything before you that's not allowable. Or if it suddenly gets to you, we're going to tell you that it's not allowable. So then it really is you all looking and determining what is the benefit to the student population. What is the educational benefit for those going? What is the larger benefit? And do you all see the value in allocating this funding for that? And that's where you all need to be consistent. And I agree, I think it's important. We think you do want to look at each one individually, because there's going to be different values, different takeaways, different objectives that come from it, and whether that meets what you all value on this committee. But I do think it's important that you think, if this was the very first funding request we received in the year, is the reason you all are not funding it is because of that part, which is a good discussion to have, is being mindful of where we're at, just to be open. As I said before, and I appreciate you sharing on your end, Alejandro, kind of where your stance is, because it's important, if you all are not in favor of something, that you all articulate that so you all can discuss it as a group. So again, you all kind of understand where that is, and in case there is other people who either can provide more information or might be on the same page but not knowing. And it also helps to provide information to the groups requesting funds in terms of where our decision making is really coming from. So they know coming up, my request falls in that same boat, I'm likely going to end up under the same type of discussion as that.
Cece?
I would like to say that I do see where Alejandro's coming from, and that looking at things to be equitable, and I feel this, I'm new obviously, but looking at how the tables have turned in the past few weeks that I've been here, it kind of just seems that the decrease in the budget is making more people aware of what's beneficial to Central as a whole and what's beneficial to the group going. And I, through conversations with people on this committee, and we talked about now that the pot is limiting, people are viewing things, okay, like, is this going to help, again, Central or who's going? But I also do see Eric's point as well. And yeah, that's just my little spiel.
Greg?
Yeah, I mean, it all makes sense, what everybody's saying. I mean, it's all very, good points. And I think it is a lot. We're running towards the end of the last column there. The money's running dry. I think we're going to discuss that at the end. There is a much larger pot over here that that's there. And it's interesting to think, if I thought about it, if this was at the very beginning to now, maybe it's a different opinion. And I guess the other point is that what's best for Central, right? What's the value of this? Because we ask that question of most groups, and what are you gonna bring back? And, probably in my mind, some have better responses than others. But I think as a whole, we're talking 10 students. These 10 students are Central. They're part of Central. So that's, does that represent the whole body? I mean, no, because there's 10,000 students, so that's a very small part of it. But they are Central. This does look like a very unique opportunity. This is a group that has been doing trips, and I think for the last 10 years, they haven't come to us, to S&A for funding, because they have sought other sources, and I think they even said that they're not gonna come next year. They've already have something else lined up for money to support this trip. So it's a kind of a unique thing for this group to come to this table for funds. We have other groups that come year after year after year for the same thing. And so, I mean, for me, I'm gonna consider that. That's all.
Do you still thoughts?
I just like the way what we kind of did last week, the last couple of weeks. I've talked about, others people have talked about how we should weigh each thing, like Joey was saying, like it was the first week of committee meetings. And so we need to, take that into consideration. But like last week, we kind of took a turn to analyze, bigger requests based on the people that are going. It was different, So I think to be fair and equitable, the previous groups that have come as well, we should evaluate. We need to continue evaluating each group that comes forward in a proper way, right? I echo everything else. So I don't think there's got to be a balance in the way we do things. It's hard to put a good definition on that balance, but like for this one particularly, it's expensive, yeah, but students that are going are committed. They're willing to bring it back to Central, and Greg brought up some good points there at the end about how their previous requests have not come through S&A, and possibly their future will not, because they have other sources of funding, and even on their budget chart, they have a good source of fundraising. That's good to see. It's another country, across the world, so it's going to be expensive to travel there. You got to weigh, is that going to benefit all of the students on campus as well as the ones that are going? And I think they talked about that, about how it would benefit students on campus as well as the ones that are going, obviously. All in all, I'd like to rekindle Eric's initial motion of funding the full amount of $19,150.
Eric, you second?
Yes.
Discussion on the motion, fund them the full amount. Seeing none, we'll move to voting. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? So moved. Fund them the full amount. Move on to request 2033, which is the 2020 Women in Aviation Conference for $6,600. Yeah. I'll go through. Eric?
I remember 2 years ago, I think when they came here for the first time asking for money from S&A, they were a brand new club, not really certain what they could do to get money and funding and stuff. And it's nice to see the organization continue to come back to grow and support diversity in our own airline program, where the majority of the students are male. And I would like to make a motion to approve their amount of make a motion to recommend that $6,600 be approved for their funding.
Alright, we have a motion on the table. And then the full amount. Josh, do you second?
Yeah.
Josh seconds. Move to discussion on the motion to fund them the full amount.
Just a question, I wrote down this, it was a $6,000 ask, I don't know why I wrote that down.
That's what we have on their original form as well.
Okay.
Maybe they updated it. They did.
For 6,000.
Yeah, so the breakdown is hotel for 2,100, airfare for 4,000, and Uber or transportation for 500.
So 66 is the correct ask. Okay.
Okay. So they're requesting $6,600, not 6,000. Dane, do you have discussion?
No.
Oh, okay, same thing. Alright, any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll move to voting. All those in favor, funding the full amount? Opposed? 2 abstentions? So moved, funding the full amount. We will move on to request 2034 Alpha Kappa Psi Conference for $2,152.39. I'll open up the floor to discussion. Greg?
There was the Funds Council request, does that reduce this, or that's in addition to this? Is that?
I don't know if that's,
I think it was in addition
Yeah.
yes.
to it, but I don't have that much.
Yeah, I mean,
I think it says right here, like, was that property in the funds council, and they said yes, but they will receive.
yeah, they're
This is in addition.
on top of,
Yeah.
Okay.
and as far as I know, they have not confirmed the 2,000 from club, or funds council.
Any other discussion? Alejandro?
Were they gonna use only $250 from their club account? Or according to,
That is what I have written down, was 250.
if there's 2,000 in their account?
That, yes, that is correct. That's what I also have.
I think didn't we ask them something along those questions, or along that line? Because they didn't he say that if they can't get the funding from us, they would pay out of pocket, so like he gave the implication that that fund is being used for something else. Okay.
So it's written in the minutes. Since I was here, that's what I'm looking at.
Yeah, I don't see it.
think if we want to continue discussing this, there should be a motion of some sort to discuss.
Yes. Well, and really for point of information, what Eric is referring to is if there is no discussion and there's no motion, that essentially this motion does not go anywhere at that point. So since he's saying if you all want to continue discussing, we should discuss, otherwise we would move on to the next order of business.
When do we hear back from Funds Council, or when do you guys know when that comes around? Double check. But I guess that really doesn't affect us because it's on top, yeah. Okay.
Eric,
I'll make a motion for to fund them for the full amount.
on table, Jane seconds, fund them the full amount. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, we'll move to voting. All those in favor, funding the full amount? Opposed? Abstentions? So moved, fund the full amount. And we'll move on to the next part of the agenda, which is new business, supplemental funding request presentations, request 2035, Women in Jazz Day, CWU grant for $1,800. Is that 10 minutes to present? 10 minutes?
Hello, everyone. For those of you who don't remember me, my name is Bill Walrath. I'm the president of the CWU Gender Chapter. And I am here with Women in Jazz Day Part 2. I'm going to keep this really short. This is essentially the original budget that we presented back in October, including our original funding plan down here, which was to request $8,750 from S&A, $1,500 from SAS, and $3,500 from the Equity Service Council. This plan was changed a little bit with the creation of Funds Council that really reduced the amount of money we'd be able to request. So I decided to add the $1,500 from SAS to the S&A total. And I figured at that point that'd be okay because we can request the other remaining roughly third of our money from Equity Service Council. Unfortunately, I learned around Thanksgiving that Equity Service Council won't actually be taking funding requests from clubs this year because they had to, from what I understand, they had to adopt some extra organizations and that really stretched their budget, so they would not be taking funding requests from clubs. So the new plan, thankfully, we're coming in under budget. My original budget was $13,750. And we're coming in under budget this year. And on the docket it says $1,800, but actually all we will really be requesting is the $14.93 and 42 cents for this request. The reason we're requesting just the hotels is because the hotels we recently learned have to be included in the contract. There was some differences in interpretation of policy regarding what needs to be included in the honorarium for an outside vendor. And my original understanding was that hotels did not need to be included in that honorarium in the conversations with people. And then I learned last week that it was. So, my original plan at that point was to request from Funds Council, but they are unfortunately backlogged pretty considerably. So any request that I submit now wouldn't be seen until the spring. And because we don't have money in our club account to cover the hotels entirely on our own, the contracts will be held up until spring, which is a problem considering the events in April. So the good news is we need a lot less money for hotels than we originally thought. Went from $2,200 down to $1,493.42. And I just learned yesterday evening that the Diversity and Equity Center will be able to contribute $500 to the event, which will help cover costs for things like flyers and welcome packets and name tags that we have out of the event. There's a difference between these two numbers $25, and that will be coming out of our club account, along with any other expenses that come up from this point forward. We had a funding request that got denied for $1,200, and that did limit our ability to contribute to the event. I did the math on our weekly fundraiser, and it will take about one academic year of fundraising to get that money back. So hopefully we can get that money from Funds Council, and that'll get us back to where we were. Again, that won't happen until the spring. So that is all I have. That's just a recap of how the situation has changed since November for us. And I can yield the rest of my time to questions.
10 minutes of questions. Jess?
So is it's the 1493 and not
Yes.
the 1800?
1493 is what we're actually, yes. We had some last minute things that was around actually just on Monday that changed the amount.
Eric?
Is the clinician fees separate of the honorarium?
So the honorarium is a lump sum amount for the fees for the services that they provide.
So
and
it's the same
staff.
thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the honorarium is fees, gas for the clinicians that are driving over, hotels and flights. And you need that cash up front either from S&A or your club account or the company's.
Josh?
The DEC is funding $500 for this event. I'm assuming that they're doing this event as something that's supporting the mission of the DEC. Can
Yes.
you explain that? I didn't see that in the presentation or in the.
Oh, sorry. So the Women in Jazz Day event is an event that we put, is a one-day festival that we put on once a year, aimed at celebrating women in the music industry as well as inspiring younger women and educators to continue to play jazz throughout their careers and to promote promote better gender equality in the field of jazz.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Great.
I have a hard time
Oh,
hearing way back
sorry.
here, but, so we've already funded this, we did, just want to make sure I'm on page here, because, we see so many, I forget.
Yes, in November, this was funded for the $10,250 with the understanding that we'd be able to get the remaining, well, with the understanding that any remaining money we need to get from the Service Council or club account. But then I learned late fall order that Equity Service Council wanted to take the funds request, so that kind of changed our plans.
Well, and to clarify, because I think you said this also, the other funding request that was denied impacted the club funds that you all had available. Is that what you said earlier too?
Yes, as we had two funds requests fall quarter for smaller clinics. We have our two big requests for the year, which are this and the Gen Conference. And then we had two smaller funds requests for fall quarter, one of which was approved for $750. The other one for $1,200 was
And so you all had to use club funds
yes,
for those?
that
Okay.
one was, as of right now, it's entirely online.
So you still move forward with those. That obviously changes the.
Yeah.
Josh?
Your write-up notes that this event will be a professional and develop opportunity for teachers and students alike. Have you approached the faculty to fund any of this? I know there's professional development for faculty. I'm wondering if that was part of the conversation.
I don't know about any funds specifically for professional development. If they exist, I'd be happy to look into them. In the past, the music department has been able to contribute to this event. In fact, they really bailed us out last year when there was another issue with the contracts that we had to sort out last minute. But this year, they won't be able to, and I don't know 100% of the details for that, but there's essentially no money through the department.
Eric?
Have you considered asking for I'll call it a donation from participants?
From participants, I have not considered that. It's really part of a big part of our mission to make this event completely free for anyone who wants to attend. We do accept donations, but we're actually not allowed to ask technically.
Harry?
Are you allowed to charge an admittance to the event?
I think we would be allowed to, but it would, and from what I've seen from other funding requests, it makes it, it's difficult to say, how do I say this? It makes the event a lot less accessible, and it makes it difficult to ask for it to be paid for by the university and then charge university students to attend.
In prior years, do you have an idea of how many non-student attendees have attended? So faculty or members of the community?
I have to look at our spreadsheet. I think last year we had about 150 attendees. I'd say around half were central students and faculty, and the other half were people from neighboring schools and alumni as well.
Any other questions? Yeah, no, Jess. Last
Are these
question.
neighboring, like, other colleges or like some high schools nearby? Like, were these students like recruited then to come to Central this next year, or?
Neighboring schools, including obviously Ellensburg High School, Morgan Middle School, and some schools on the west side. And we have seen students at this event and then they've shown up as freshmen.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all so much.
Alright, we'll move on to funding request 2036 NFL Career Conference for $2,000.
Hello, my name is Julie. I am a student in the sport management program, which is a part of the College of Professional Studies. Sorry. I'm very nervous, so bear with me here. And if I skip over anything, please feel free to ask me questions that come to your mind when we get to that point in time. Okay, so the NFL Combine Career Conference is hosted by Sport Management Worldwide each year in Indianapolis, Indiana. Some of the opportunities that are available at the conference are the ability to network with industry professionals, get career guidance from well-known executives within the industry, insight on what you need to know to get hired. The NFL is one of the toughest organizations, like sports organizations, to get into. It just is very competitive, and it actually kind of small compared to other sports organizations. There are also mentors who are there who want to help you. Many of these people come from sports teams or within like media, agents, things like that, that all revolve around the NFL. It's a chance to connect with other sports career-driven individuals, information about changes and innovation within the industry, which is good as students to know, so that when we are trying to be competitive in getting jobs, we can reference the type of information, and strategies to catapult your career to the next level, or our students' career to the next level. Here are some specific details of what the trip will look like. We will be leaving February 26th early in the morning to get to SeaTac, and we'll be flying home the evening of the 29th. The conference dates are from the 28th to the 29th. Transportation to and from Ellensburg will be on our own. We're looking at parking at the airport. We have not nailed down exactly which company we'll be using, so that's why that kind of is in asterisks there. We have airfare through Alaska Airlines. We are using an Airbnb for lodging to save costs. Transportation to Indianapolis, in Indianapolis, we plan on renting a minivan. We did the numbers as to what it would look like if we were to do Uber. With 7 of us going, it would require us to take 2 Ubers everywhere, which brings us to about $350 to almost $400 when I went in and faked everywhere we were going. It came up pretty high. unfortunately. And then the food will be on our own. Also, I'm sorry, I forgot. I'm going to go back to this slide. No, I'm sorry. To the top of this slide. You can see that our dates are February 26th to the 29th. And so, as you can see right now, nothing is accounted for on the 27th. We gave ourselves that extra day to hopefully connect with another sports organization within Indianapolis. Indianapolis has a ton of sports organizations, and one that we are working very hard on and have been using our connections from CW is to get into the NCAA headquarters and meet with them there and learn more about what they do at the NCAA, how that affects colleges, learning more about their process and things like that. So, and then this is just the 7 travelers that are going. We are all either a sport management major or a sport business minor. There's only one sport business minor and everybody else is a sport management major. And here is the breakdown of our funding. So I know on your sheets, when I originally sent in the request, we put $2,000 because we had not purchased our airfare tickets yet, and that's what we were looking to get to get funded from S&A, sorry. And so as it stands right now, we purchased our airline tickets and they total to $1,867.67, which is what we are actually going to be asking you for now. That's the only thing that we are requesting funding for from S&A. Some of the other requests, as you can see, we're asking $1,600 from SAS, which would just cover our parking at the airport, our conference registration, the rental car, and an approximate gas for rental car. We will be covering our lodging and our own personal food, as well as anything else we choose to do in Indianapolis, and that is our breakdown. And a few more things before I finish it up. I just kind of wanted to explain to you how this is going to benefit CWU. Sports management is a newer degree program. It got started in 2017, so we are currently in our 3rd school year of the degree program. With that in mind, we are continually looking to bring in new opportunities for students. This would be the first out-of-state conference or anything like it that anybody in our program has attended. Something that we really are pushing for is that we don't want to come back here next year. We're hoping to bring the information we learned back, the experiences we had, and talk to our department chair, our professors, whoever we need to talk to see what we can do to get funding, maybe not for this conference, but for a similar type conference, and maybe they rotate yearly, but so that we can kind of get this introduced into the department. We did not find out about this until December, like early December, late November of this year, so it just has kind of been a whirlwind of like getting things in, figuring out money, things like that. And then lastly, kind of sharing our knowledge with other CWU students. There are only 7 of us going, and that is not the whole sport management department. But being able to network and make connections within the industry allows us to bring those connections back to, whether they come here in person, whether we're just able to share that information, share that contact information. The other really cool thing is that the majority of travelers, as you saw, that are going are seniors and juniors. And we're, as a senior myself, like I'm starting to look for a job now. So, you know, anybody who were to get into the industry or any sports industry for that matter, like becomes a reference for CW. We can come back, share our knowledge, be that contact person. So that's kind of what we're hoping to do here, is to create those connections, network, and bring all of that back to CWU to share with the entire program. Thank you.
Yes, we did 10 minutes of questions. Eric?
Did you all fundraise to pay for the Airbnb, or
No, we are paying out of our own pocket.
just
for that.
your own? Yeah.
Yes, that we looked at fundraising, just time was not on our
Makes
side.
sense.
So,
Makes sense.
yes.
Could you go back to your breakdown?
Yes, thank you.
Thanks. No, I'm good.
Eric?
Have you met with the Funds Council yet?
I meet with them tonight. Yes, so, right after this.
Okay.
Eric?
So, ostensibly, the Funds Council decides to not support your request What's the next plan, I guess is my question. I'm just curious.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, all of this has pretty much been purchased already, so,
Would just be on
yeah.
everyone's, okay.
It is currently all on me, and we've been, like, we broke up the Airbnb, and people pay me for their share of that. So it would be on me to just break up whatever funding we don't get, and hopefully get it back. So we just, time was of the essence, unfortunately, so.
That's fair.
Not that I'm not trying to make a sob story at all, so, yes.
Great.
7 students are going.
Yes.
And so I want to ask how they were selected to go, and there is, you know, there is a chunk of money out of pocket here for students. Were any students not able to go because they didn't have that?
Yes. I don't know if that was the full, there was one student who chose not to go. We kind of talked about what could come out of pocket, and we said it could be anywhere from $100 to $200. So right now, we're looking at about $75 a piece for the Airbnb, but that does not include food when we get there. And the nice thing about using the Airbnb is that we plan to go to the store when we get there and get like meals that we can make as a group, so spaghetti, tacos, you know, breakfast foods that we can all share, and then split that money up again. So we're still probably looking at a little bit more coming out from each person's pocket. That will go towards the group effort, plus anything that they choose to do on their own. Another connection that we've possibly made is to tour the Pacers stadium, which I'm so sorry it is blanking on my mind right now. But in order, like, if we got that opportunity, we would most likely have to pay for a ticket to the game, which aren't super expensive. They're about $15 to $20, but that would still be coming out of pocket as well for that. So the way that people were selected was an email that went out to sport management students that said, here's an opportunity. If you're interested, please come to this meeting. There were 9, including myself, there were 9 students total that came. One person just said the timing was not going to work for him. And then the other person, which is where I'm saying, yes, there might have been a funding issue, was that they were a little vague on it. They just said it's not going to work out right now. So whether that was timing and money, whether it was just money, I did ask them to let me know if it was money and we could try to work something out, but that individual did not choose that option.
Dave, do you have questions still?
That was my question.
Oh, okay. Any other questions for sports management? Seeing none, thank you. Come on next week. Thank you. Cool. Alright, we will move on to request 2037, which is SIB shop training for family and child life program, $7,000.
We'll pull it up. You
Sorry,
have a brief
I don't. Okay, we want to introduce our special guests first because their parents could be showing up to pick them up. So we actually brought along some representatives of the local SIB shop. And so this is Emery, Zoe, and Trevor. And if they're still around at the end, they're available for some questions, but they may have to leave some of them before we finish. While they're looking for that, my name is Katie Wallace. I'm a master's student in the Family Child Life program. And
I'm Kristen Malik. I'm also a master's student in the Family and Child Life program. And we're both actually their SIB shop leaders in Owensburg.
And so while they're looking, we'll probably just start because we know that you're on a time. We are asking for $7,000 to fund a SIB shop training here at Central Washington University.
Sure. So SIB shops is a place for siblings like them who have a brother or sister with special needs. And so it's a place for them to meet other siblings for the first time, make that connection and that relationship for other kids that get what it's like to have a SIB with a disability. It's also a place for them to have fun and have a space that's just theirs rather than, they're constantly sharing spaces with their brother or sister. It's actually worldwide, and there's only one trainer in the world who can certify people. So it's super important that people get their certifications. That way they can lead SIP shops, because if you don't have your trainer certification, you are not able to.
Okay, so just to clarify one more time, so SIB shops are programs that are for the children who have a brother or a sister who has an exceptionality. And so it's a tremendously important and forgotten group of people. When you think about it, the sibling is the longest relationship that the person with the disability is going to have, realistically. And so this is a population that is often overlooked. The children that are brothers and sisters their siblings have lots and lots of attention, often therapies, doctor appointments, and they are left out. Kristen and I are actually siblings ourselves, and so we are very passionate about this. This program is well renowned throughout the world, and our SIP shop here and the training that we plan to bring is the official training for SIP shop. This is just a quick slide about a research, some research that was done about SIP shops, and so the University of Washington did some research and found that it can be very beneficial throughout the lives of the children and the families who are able to attend. Our thought process is we would like to bring a training here to Central Washington University to allow not just students, but also faculty, community members, and parents to come and learn more about the challenges and the opportunities that are unique to siblings of people with exceptionalities. The official training is a 2-day training. So this first day that we would be bringing here is open to as many people as we can seat comfortably. So our plan is probably around 85 if we can get a really nice auditorium here on campus. We will be targeting parents, community members, students, and Central Washington University faculty members. The community members will include teachers from the local elementaries, middle school, and high school. What we hope to achieve in that first day and what happens with that training is to raise the awareness of the entire community about the needs of siblings. In our program that Kristen and I are getting our master's, we have a lot of focus on the family systems theory. So whether you know about that or not, I think if you think about your own families, you know that if one family member has something go on, it affects the entire system. And so we would like to see families have that understanding that that one child in their family with the exceptionality is changing the dynamic of everything that's going on in the family, and that these are people within the family that need special support. We also hope to promote through this the awareness too of how to start SIB shops in other places. We think they should be everywhere and really easily accessible. On the second day, so people who attend for both days will be allowed to be official SIB shop facilitators. Kristen and I uniquely already have this certification, but very few people do. So even the helpers, we have tons of helpers come to help us with our group, but they are not allowed to go anywhere else and replicate SIB shops because they haven't had this training, even though they could probably do that. So the second day, we hope we'll have to limit how many people are there, because that is a live shop. Our students, some of our kids will be coming to help us train people, and we'll be putting on a SIB shop and training with hands-on experience. So we're going to limit that to 35 people, and I'd like to talk a little bit about how that will work. There's also a new class. There's a whole new strand of teaching going on in the Family Child Life program that's going to be focused on child development and some brand new things. So one of the new classes is a whole class about parents and professionals how to engage with one another and how to support parents of children with disabilities. The students from that class will be given first notice that this is available and open to them. We're not connecting it to any points or any kind of grade in the class, but we are going to open it to them first. Then we'd like to open it up to education students, nursing students. So this is so far-reaching. We're affecting communities. Ultimately, by doing this, we'll be affecting the world and making it a better place. Right, guys? Right. Okay. So the second day, we hope to have people understand better siblings' lifelong concerns and needs. They'll be able to get certification so that they can replicate this. And I'm going to ask Kristen to take just a moment and talk about specifically child life specialists, which we produce here at Central Washington University, and how this would relate to their work.
So in the Family and Child Life graduate program, I'm focusing more on child life, which is going into pediatric hospitals and looking at families in stressful situations. And also what needs to be looked at the most, well not the most, obviously it's the patient first, but it's also that sibling that's being left behind, you know, at home or just totally forgotten in that situation, but it also applies to the broad idea of any sort of healthcare professional, like nurses or any sort of teachers or anything else that Katie's been talking about, because it also needs to be thinking about the family systems theory, but thinking about the siblings and the family as a whole, as they're impacted, especially with those with exceptionalities.
So I know your concern is what will students here get from this, and I think this is incredibly important. This is going to add tremendous value to the resumes of our students. We had one master's student last year who helped regularly with SIP Shop. She has already contacted me because she's been approached for an internship just because she mentioned that she helped with SIP Shop, even though she's unable to replicate the program elsewhere because she doesn't have this added training. So this really helps in the case of all of the resumes. I can imagine with education students, it would be extremely valuable too to be able to say that you can run this at a school during your interview. These SIP shops vary. In order to get this training, the cost varies tremendously. So it's very expensive most often. It's $250, $300 for one person to come and get this training. The other part about this is that it is very infrequently offered. It's only offered once a year in the state of Washington. So by doing this for our central students, we're adding a second time in the state that it'll be offered. But because we're asking you for the funding, we want to guarantee that it is our students and that they can come without paying anything extra. I could tell you that maybe in future years we will open it up and people will come from all around the world. The SIP Shop training I attended it with people who were there from Fiji who were wanting to start their own program. So it's very popular in that regard. And finally, it's hands-on with kids, and so few things offer that to our students. And then some of the benefits, because remember we have day one too, where parents and teachers can come, is we believe that this will also lead to better classroom discussions. That faculty who attend that first day will be able to bring some of this information into their classrooms all throughout the year when they're teaching. And I think it'll build a stronger relationship with the students or the college and the community. And so let's just end this for you. Here is our budget. And most of these costs are just the cost that the SIP Shop program charges. So we don't have a lot of room to wiggle or negotiate. So yes, there is a large fee for this one. There's only one trainer who can come. So this is that training fee. On the first day, we just release people to have their own lunch, but on the second day, we like to feed everyone who's there, keep them there. And that includes the kids who are coming in to participate. So we have a lunch plan there, just pizza, Domino's. We've already priced it out. The demonstration supplies are very simple, and so you can go down and see pretty much each and everything and the total there. And so that's basically our presentation. We're happy to take some questions, right guys? Yeah! Okay.
Thank you. And we'll open up the 10 minutes of questions. Dave?
I have two questions.
Yes.
First off, what is like the age range that Sib Shops serves?
Sorry, it's school age, I was listening.
So like anywhere up to like through high school or?
We usually stop just outside elementary school, and
Okay.
then we provide other services, like there's a Facebook group for the teen Sibs, and there's other things.
And actually, at least, Kristen, when I was trained, you can provide a program like that. In our local program, we have one teenager, and we have her come sometimes as an assistant. And so basically, I know in our program, we don't really turn anybody away. But we're really focused on, 6 through 12 years old.
My second question was about the second training day. So you said FCL students enrolled get first dibs. And then it's central students after that, or is it open to the public too?
Well, if we don't fill all those 35 slots, then we will go to elementary teachers or nurses. But I'm very confident we'll fill our 35 spots.
Or CWU students?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, that's the intention, is only CWU students. I hate to leave a spot empty. Yes.
The write-up says that the FCL students will be required to attend the training?
No, and was it you that I talked to them? It was
Yep.
you? Yes, okay, so maybe that was taken out of an original request. No, we're not going to require it. And there won't be any points assigned, there won't be any extra credit. Yeah, it's gonna be on a Friday and a Saturday. So first of all, we didn't feel like that was very fair. So yeah, we won't be doing that.
How many students do you all have in the FCL program, or even with the child development, the new major? Do you know how many students roughly?
In my cohort alone, there's just 13, but in the whole entire department, there's, oh gosh, a lot. I don't know that number, I just know that my cohort is 13.
Yeah.
But in your class, you
In the class that we will tell them first that they can register, and basically that's all that's happening. They'll know X number of days before the rest of the world will know. There's probably only about up to 25 maximum, and I can't imagine all would go. And so the plan is to market it throughout, and we will target those service majors. So education, especially special education. I actually have I know several students. My husband's a professor in the ed department. So we have a lot of people clamoring to kind of get on board and get it. We'll just have to figure out how we'll probably be first come, first serve after the initial release.
Alejandra, so students need to attend both days to get the certification? And then
Yes.
Are these all-day trainings?
Yes.
Okay. Could that like potentially be a barrier? Like say if some of the students have classes on Friday and they can't attend the training the whole time?
I know in the family and child art department, we as a whole entire department do not have classes on Fridays, so I know that would be a barrier for those students, but I'm not sure about other departments.
I know that they don't have tons of classes on Fridays for the education students, but I mean, I think we'll have some advance notice and that would be something they'd have to ask to be excused.
Great. So there's only one person in the whole world that can lead this training and certify SIB shop. Is that what I understand?
Yes.
And that person gets $6,000 for 2 days?
Well, the organization gets the $6,000.
I was just curious.
Yeah.
What a racket.
Yeah, no, we've already talked about that we're going to work on that because we'd like to see a trainers program. And we have Kristen who's out to be the person to do it. And I did talk to the person who does this and said if this were to be a repeating event and we are already trained, can we, we will be facilitating this with the trainer. It requires that she also have some first generation, she calls them facilitators. So we will be the assistants, and she hinted at that maybe down the road there could be something we can work out. That's what we're hoping if we want to repeat it. Or if we find that it's really popular, we'll just see if we can make it bigger and bring in paying customers. But this time, we really want it to be free.
Any more questions? Seeing none, thank you. Put on next week.
And if there is any food back there, they want to grab chips and
taking
stuff,
you
they
here.
can.
Thank
Yes.
you.
We went to dinner in the circle. We had a great time. Thank you.
Alright, we'll move on to our final request of the night, 2038, the NASP conference site close, $5,252.
Got it. My name is Erica.
My name's Maritza Beasley. My name is Bianca.
And we are all first year graduate students in the school psychology program here at Central. This program is pretty selective and small in that first years there are only 10 of us, second years there are 11, and third years there are 8, so in total we are small and we stick together. So school psychology is this kind of thing that no one knows about, but people think they know what it is, but no one knows what it is. We strive to support teachers, families, parents, through a variety of ways. In total, there are 30 to 40 school psychologists in the U.S. That sounds like a lot, but our average caseload is 1,200 students when it should be around 750. School psychologists can work to improve students' academics, their behavior, strengthen family-school partnerships, and really our main goal is to see the children succeed in whatever they choose to do.
So the conference we'll be attending is called NASP. It's the National Association of School Psychologists. And it's a professional association representing more than 25,000 school psychologists, graduate students, and professionals in the field. And its main vision is that all children and youth access the learning, behavior, and mental health support needed to thrive in school and at home and throughout life in general. The location is in Baltimore this year, and it's February 18 to 21. And we didn't add the breakdown of our costs on here, but we're looking to have the money that we're asking for to pay for our flights and possibly an Airbnb. We're thinking to save money. And there will be 7 of us going. We're all graduate students plus 1 undergrad student. And this conference serves as a professional development for us, and it helps us connect with others who are also school psychologists or graduate students and professionals. It helps us network, and like Erica said, we are a small group worldwide, so this would be great to better to learn new research that's out there, keep up to date with that, and to better serve students in schools. I already mentioned this, there will be 5, there's actually 6 of us, I think, 6 and then 1 undergrad.
Okay, so this is the poster that was presented in the spring, last spring, 2019 in SOARS. And our director, school psychology director, submitted it to NASP, and it was approved, so this will be at NASP. And it was Kristen, who could be here, and myself, and maybe an undergrad who worked on this. So kind of just going over the poster. So some background, as Erica mentioned, school psychology is a field that a lot of people don't really know about, and the programs are selective, and there are very few of them. I think there are only 3 or 4 in the state of Washington. And then we kind of just wanted to know the undergraduate perceptions of graduate school in psychology. So our first research question kind of was asking undergrads about counseling, clinical, and school psychologists, and just I think the research questions are on there, kind of like asking where they work, what they do, kind of what their training is to become that professional. And the results were that students knew more about counseling psychology. And then our second question was how familiar were they with the various different types of psychology, and number 1 was mental health counseling. So mental health counseling is one of our graduate psychology programs, and it is like the most popular one, so that was kind of expected. But that's
something that we could possibly be presenting as source if we need.
So some of the reasons we believe this could be a great opportunity for us, so school psychology, as we mentioned, is a very small field. In many cases, we will be the only school psychologist working at the school that we work at, and sometimes we'll serve multiple schools on our own. So we need to find our professional connections elsewhere, this is a great opportunity for that because, Maryland is known for being one of the best states for school psychology. So we'd love to go to be able to learn more about what they've done and like how we can progress to like follow those footsteps. And also, it's a constantly changing field and growing, so we want to be able to keep up with the latest research so we can be serving students the best way possible. So that is also another thing that we could be doing at this conference. So we just want to be prepared for our future careers and to ensure that our knowledge and skills stay relevant and up to date, and this is the best opportunity for us to do that.
And I do want to add to that the importance of moving towards advancing research, because the method that is mostly used in Washington is pretty much a method that tests students to put them in special education, and that's kind of like the easy way, but we want to create systems change in our school districts to make sure that doesn't happen and to make sure that we intervene before a student struggles in the classroom.
Open up any questions. Great.
There's 7 grad students here. I see 5 named, and then I think you correct yourself to 6.
Yeah, so our original plan was for 8 students, I believe. Yeah, and then some students decided not to. Who was one who said not to go?
Yeah,
she decided not to go.
So it's 6 total.
I thought it was 7, 6 graduate and 1 undergraduate.
Oh.
5 plus 1 undergrad.
Okay,
Sorry,
so 5.
6, sorry.
Have you gone to this conference before?
No, this is the first time.
Alejandro?
Have there been, or are there any fundraising attempts planned?
It's kind of something new. I think that I kind of knew about it, so it was originally going to be just the 2 of us going to NASP, but then there was interest like elsewhere, and it was like our director kind of said, hey, like, we want to go to NASP, what if last month? So something that we kind of just decided.
Eric?
Has anyone reached out to request travel funds from the graduate school or for the student, the undergrad, to reach out to the Office of Undergrad Research for funding, other funding possibilities?
No, I don't think so for graduate students. It's just like, well, cancel, and then our director do that.
Josh?
How were people selected? I saw some were part of the poster presentation, but how were the others selected? And how was the opportunity opened up to other members in the school psychology program?
Well, since we are first year students, our professor, which all 3 of the main school psychology professors are going to the conference, and so they opened up the opportunity for everyone. And the second years already went last year, I believe, and so they opened up the opportunity for all first years. But of course, there's some that are interested, some that are not. So there's a total of 10 of us, first year students, and only a few of us.
Eric?
So since this opportunity was opened up from professors, was there any funding possibility from the Department of Psychology?
We don't have any, yeah, we didn't have any funding available.
Alejandro?
Has anything actually like been booked, like either flights or hotels or registration?
No, we've looked at the flights and the estimation of what it
I
costs.
think we were just kind of waiting just because we all couldn't pay for it on our own. So we're just kind of waiting, so it's kind of like
Eric?
So with that being said, and this is a reimbursement, reimbursement dollars, have you been in contact with the Department of Psychology or the Office of Student Involvement to assist in, I'm just using you as, you're sitting there, so. As a way
Question's not-
to pay for things up front, I guess that's my question.
We haven't contacted the
Lacey?
psychology department. But I think Mark said, our professor said that there's no funding from the psychology department used for this.
Lacey?
To clarify, the student involvement office can only help once funds are approved,
That's fair.
just as a point.
Greg?
The conference is on the 18th of this month, so what's the date of next Wednesday?
12.
12th. And airline tickets usually change as you get closer to that, so I have to move fast.
Yes.
Alejandro?
If this is only like partially funded, what would be the plan for the bills?
If it was only partially funded, we would just simply outgo Kristen because they are doing the poster presentation, and I feel like because they're presenting, they have to be there. That's not something that you can do over Skype or over like just a phone call. So we would send, if it was just partially funded, we would just send those two. And the undergrad student, and the rest of us would stay here.
Any other questions?
Thank you all.
Okay, so that ends presentation. We'll move on to the next part of new business, which is the budget discussion. As it says discussion, I'll just open it up to floor discussion, and we'll go from there. Alex?
And I guess we're just open up the conversation. This is after the ones that we've approved today?
That is correct.
64,000?
Mhm.
I think we're at where we're at. Let's move forward. That's all I got to say.
What do you mean by it?
Oh, like this is the amount of money that we have.
Oh.
Let's do requests till we don't have money anymore.
Okay. Greg?
So I just, I have a question.
Yeah.
There is, and I'm losing track of the term, but there's a reserve pot of money that we have gone to in the past to increase the budget when we wanted to, that's my understanding. So I want to ask how much, what that is, and I believe that it was this year, last year, there is a certain amount that we need to retain, and I think we reduced that to a different dollar amount recently. So could we just throw those numbers out, because I lost them.
You need a whiteboard.
No, thank you. So for clarification on just the piece of the required amount of reserves that we need to have in our account, even though we had reduced that from 1.5 to 500,000, that technically has not been approved yet from UPAC. So the university policy, or the university committee has not. So as of right now, we still are required to have 1.5 in our reserve until that policy gets approved and goes into effect. That being said, with what we have available in the supplemental bucket is roughly about 3.4 million. There is other funding, but a lot of that other funding is within the base funded areas. And so when we talked about base funded areas not requesting additional money, because it was due to the fact that they were intentionally trying to spend down their fund balances. So to kind of recap, basically what we would do is, if the committee was to vote to increase this year's budget, it would be taking money from that 3.4 roughly available funds. But just to remind everybody, that is a one-time kind of bucket. We're not necessarily adding to that each year. And so just to be mindful of that, please.
Well, and to add on to that, that it's not being added to, there's no plans to add to that. This was part of a previous reserve policy where we were taking out of the amount that we were bringing in each year and putting a percentage in there. And then made the decision, because there was not a plan to spend that we need to stop doing that. So now, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the only funds that would be going into that reserve is if we end up in a year where we end up having a massive increase in enrollment that we're not anticipating, and so we bring in more revenue than what we budgeted out, then it could go there, although that's not what is it looking like on the forecast, because we are budgeting these out, and we'll look into next year with the 4-year, or at the end of the 4-year cycle, any remaining balances that the base funding has, which is in the larger scale is a small amount that sweeps back. We don't know what that's going to look like at the end of next year, given the increases for cost of living and minimum wage that a lot of those areas are absorbing themselves. So that's, when you're thinking about this bucket that we're not putting things into, that's really the only ways, unless I'm missing something, that any funds would be able to go in there. So we are eating away from that.
Is that making money? Is it in a place where it's like making interest or something else? Is it invested or I mean we can't do that with those funds.
So there's a certain percentage that we can do, but it's a little complicated to probably describe at this committee. But as a general statement, there are funds that we do strategically invest, but we have a lot of requirements because we're a government entity. So, for example, overall, I think off the top of my head, we might have made $200,000 over this would have been last year of investment money, but that is still included in the dollar figures when we're talking about the revenue generated from S&A. So since we basically made money off of S&A money, it still is S&A money. So kind of going back to what Joey is referencing, I would say the change in this current funding cycle, so this 4-year period, is vastly different than it was the previous 4 years, meaning we are trying to allocate out every single penny. And so the intent is to spend each year down to that, try to get as close to zero as possible. The previous funding cycle was not the same. They actually had budgeted into the annual revenue, the supplemental budget. And as you guys can tell, is there was some years where they would spend $100,000 and some years they wouldn't spend $300. But that was kind of budgeted into that annual revenue stream. So all of that being said, I would say we're not looking to, that's not the plan, in order to net a positive to add to this fund in the future years. And based off of just inflation and what we kind of know what's going to happen at least in the next handful of years, expenses are going to rise across the board, goods and services, and also cost of living.
Eric? This question is for Jeff.
You almost made it out, Jeff.
It's quick. Yeah. So West Side Student Life is requesting $35,000, and maybe, huh? No. I understand that, but well, I don't care. Someone answer this question. Do they have other base funding to support activities and what have you at the centers? Or maybe I'm confusing
I'll
things.
answer that.
Maybe
they're
I'm
going to give
confusing.
more information when they come in. There is, similar to the request that we had to change the wording of it, so there is some base funding already to our centers.
I was just curious.
This request is in addition to that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
You can go now.
Yeah.
Greg?
So I guess what Lacey was saying, that there is this sense that costs are going up, the cost of living, and there's other aspects that we're probably going to have to start tapping into some of that reserve or that 3.4 or whatever
covering these things, is there, I mean, can we foresee, not foresee, is there a possibility that there's something very catastrophic, something really expensive, like that could happen, like the whole AC system of the CERC breaks down and we've got to use that money and spend $1 million tomorrow?
Well, knock on wood, Greg. But I mean, I would say we do need to be mindful of that. I mean, obviously we have, when I say we, I mean the student involvement team, the student union team, even the rec center team. These are things, topics that we are constantly, monthly meeting about how to, replace in a lifespan of to ensure that those types of things don't happen. However, as I'm sure everybody can understand, there's only so much we can foresee and prevent, and so those areas are managed. But something to be mindful of is the S&A fund fee is supposed to help support this physical building as well, and so if something was to happen and other areas, either the rec center or the student union, were in a situation where that was not something that they could fund, this would be one of the only avenues that they would have. We are not state funded. There is no call for capital. There is none of those types of situations that would be associated with a building like this.
Cece?
My little statement would just be, I think we should leave it where it's at, budget, just because, we don't know what's gonna happen next year, years after, and if we're doing a catastrophic event, where they need $1.something million. But, and just looking ahead for future students coming to Central, being critical with past requests, it shouldn't fall back on students who haven't had the opportunity to get here yet, and then to potentially not have funding because we touched a pot that we weren't supposed to.
Eric?
Since I'm dancing on out of this building in a few months, I'll ask the question. Has it been, have discussions begun about the possibility of raising the S&A fee? To cover, not having anything to do with this particular discussion, but future possibilities of change.
Well, and to answer that, I'll say there's always questions about whether that is. Although I do want to point out that would come from this committee of a proposal to increase the fee, given that's part of our overview of it. And that's part of the intent of us being mindful of trying to use up the full amount of allocation we have and using these reserved funds for supplemental to push off increasing the S&A fee for as long as possible. But there obviously will come a time when we either need to make a decision to increase or to change the types of services we're funding, just based on cost of living and inflation and other things.
Thank you.
On the piece of the fee increase discussion, I wouldn't necessarily call it a discussion, but as a financial step in our process. This is something that gets reviewed. I mean, I will say every year, but I would say actually every quarter of every year, just to maintain and to show the health of our fund as a whole. So that's kind of coming from the financial side of things, not necessarily the student voice around those, but that is something that at least mindfully we are looking at on the financial side.
Alex?
Does there need to be a motion made to not do anything?
No. To clarify, for point of information, because there's not a motion on the table, so it would only be if there is a plan from the committee or a motion to increase or make changes to it. Otherwise, right now it's just discussion on the state of where we are with the budget, looking at the amount of supplementals we still have who are going to come forward to present regardless of where we're at, for you all to discuss.
Okay.
So if we hit, our limit and then we decide we don't want to increase, do we just gonna tell them, like, sorry? Or do they get unscheduled from that? Like, how does that work?
Jess's question was if we end up spending all our money and we still have others on the docket, what would happen? Essentially, do we let them know, hey, sorry, we're out where we are? I will say that's something for you all to consider, especially given that this year we have changed the structure and saying everyone who turns it in by this point in time will be heard winter quarter. And so it depends on how you all want to facilitate that, knowing everyone who's on this docket turned it in by the deadline. We would still let them know there's no money. You also all have the ability, if there are certain things that you did want to fund after that we can have that discussion. But it's really free, that's part of this whole larger discussion we have here. But we've received them, they've all been vetted and seen on there, and they all are on the schedule for the remainder of this quarter.
Alex?
I mean, I guess my suggestion would be to keep it where it's at and then continue to work with the subcommittee to create those evaluation criteria for supplementals and for base for the rest of the year, and hopefully come up with something that we can recommend to the committee next year. I think that would be a fine way to spend the rest of our time if we end up using all this.
Barry?
I think it behooves this committee to discuss how we're going to handle this in the future. I don't want to wait until the ROTC comes with their request for $112,000 and we have, $10,000 left and we're like, sorry, we're not going to approve anymore. I find it disturbing that we allow these people to present with a maybe. I don't know that that's fair, since we did say, please request this money by this time, or we're kind of speaking out of both sides of our mouth, as far as I'm concerned.
Lacey? I think Alex is first.
And I would say that, yeah, we had that discussion at the beginning of the year when we said we should have these criteria so that we could start evaluating these things and make these decisions early on. We elected to do that in a subcommittee and not as a whole. And so I think that we should deal with where that leaves us now.
I do want to bring up just a couple of tips through this process. Is $300,000 is quite a bit of money to allocate, and even though this year it seems to be getting allocated out earlier than previous years, I still do want to make sure that we are aware that there's been a lot of work that's been done on this committee, and there's been a lot of allocations. We've seen a lot of requests. There's been a lot of time sitting at this table. So I just kind of want to say, that's a lot, and I appreciate everybody's work and discussion around that. But also another piece is I still have requests that are in my inbox right now that are coming through. So I guess my point is if we increase the budget, it's going to just keep that door open. And so that's just something that I want the committee to be aware of. The more you increase, the more requests we're going to see. And not everything is endless.
Yeah.
So I would say just be mindful of that.
Cece?
Piggybacking off what Aubrey said.
I'm Lacey.
Lacey?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what I did. I just feel like if we were to increase the budget, that there would just be more room for everyone to say yes because there's money there, and less thinking about where we're thinking critically now is how, again, like I said earlier, how it affects Central as a whole, increasing, giving us thousands of more dollars, and just because it's there doesn't mean we have to approve everything, because then we'll be back where we were in the spring where we are now. That's what I think.
Dave?
I kind of liked what you said earlier, Joey, about even if we do run out of money and we still do hear, we still have the ability to hear these people and they still want to come forward in different groups. And we still have the option to, allocate, the certain amount of money they are requesting, instead of allocating a certain big amount, like what we're talking about, like another 50,000 or whatever, right? I think that kind of makes sense to all parties. That's just my 2 cents, but.
Josh?
I just want a clarification on that. Is that the process? Do we have to vote to add additional funds to this and then we can see? Or once it gets zero, can we vote, say, well, we'll still approve 3,000 here, 4,000 there, and we just go over budget? How does that process work?
Just have this conversation.
As your financial manager, I would advise you not to go over budget. I think Joey will probably reiterate that you can vote and increase the budget pretty much at any time. But I do think that it's important to set a budget, and I realize that that's probably coming from my profession. But
Just
but I do think it's important to stay within budget. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't, increase it based off of the opinion of the committee. But I would advise to set a budget.
So respectfully, Alex, I take issue with you saying that we decided to slow this down with having a subcommittee. When you and Brendan came to the committee with a suggestion to analyze base funding and all that, there really wasn't a plan that you were presenting. So there was no information for me as a committee member to actually make a educated decision to support something that really wasn't presented other than an idea. So I think we want to watch saying that something didn't happen because somebody suggested to have a subcommittee. Because in all fairness, none of us are experts at that. I mean, I'm not, and I would rather have all the information and make this for next year than come in the middle of the year and say, well, this is how it's going to be done now, because I don't believe that's fair. And then as an example, if PBAC has yet to approve last year's changes to the
I'll touch on this.
sorry, I don't appreciate that it's because we had a subcommittee. I don't appreciate that.
So I have several things. One on that, because I understand you're responding to comments said, although I do want to make sure we stay on point with what the discussion is with this, which is this. The other part to answer that is UPAC. It did go to UPAC, but UPAC essentially they only meet once a quarter, and they canceled their fall meeting. So it's on the docket for the meeting this month, which may be next week, if I remember correctly. So we'll see. But absolutely. The other part is what I would recommend as an option to you all, regardless of what you decide with budget, but to make it clear communication-wise for all the other funding pieces as well as for circuit counting, is given where we're sitting right now with how many requests do we have that have been approved, 55 on here, that I think if we're at a spot where the committee is comfortable saying that we are not funding or timing-wise, whichever way you want to look at it, it doesn't necessarily matter. If we're not at a spot where we believe we should be receiving any additional funding packets for the year, that we should be clear on that. Because again, we've told everyone that by the deadline for winter quarter, which is what these 55 are, the handful that Lacey and Circuit Counting has would be an addition, which would be potentially, if we had funding available, things coming in spring. So I think it is within the purview of you all to say where we are now, given where the docket is, and giving whatever discussion we have on funding, that we can essentially motion to cease receiving funds requests for this year at this point. We'll handle the ones we've already received in whatever manner we will, but we can be clear in that communication, both in our minutes, as well as we'll put on the website, and then Circuit County can. Or if we do want to continue receiving them, I think that's something for you all to decide, but for us to be clear so that way we don't have multiple groups who keep submitting and making plans and trying to get funding that may not be available.
Alex.
And just to clarify, my only point with that is that now we have the opportunity to take the things that we're developing in that and apply them to supplemental requests. Not necessarily that it's slowing down the process, but now we do have the opportunity. So just to clarify with that. But as far as your point of making a plan for what we do if we do get to that, the bottom of that fund balance, I think, yeah, it would probably be fine to say, hey, this is where we're at. We don't have funds. I mean, yeah, until the end of winter, we've said we'll hear requests. I think it'd be fine to say we're willing to hear requests, but we're also not allocating any more money. So, and just leave that up to them.
Harry.
I'd like to make a motion that we inform future requests that we're not taking any more, and that we, yeah, I guess that would be a separate motion. Yeah.
Thank you.
Casey.
Well, we have to, there's a motion, so there has to be a second or, and then discussion.
All right, we have a motion. Alex seconds.
So I'm just trying to wrap my head around this for a second, so I apologize. So if the committee approves to not accept any more supplemental requests, does that mean that we're not gonna increase the budget? And I ask that because if we cut off supplementals and then be due to the fact that we don't have any money, then we end up increasing, I think that can create some conflict potentially.
Well, and just point of information, the motion didn't have a justification behind it. It was just the committee is choosing to not take any more requests.
I can amend during discussion, right?
Yes.
I would move to amend that we include that is because we will not be raising the budget after we reach the bottom of our fund balance for this budget.
After what?
After we run out of money here.
I second that amendment.
So to clarify, the current motion is to not take in any additional funding request packets, and because once we use this funding, we will not be increasing the budget.
Point of order, it was an amended, so we need to vote on the amended.
Well, I was making sure that was clear on what the amendment was.
Yeah.
So is that clear on what the amendment was? Okay.
Clarify that one more time.
Yeah.
So the amendment is to have the motion say that we are not going to receive any additional funding requests after what's on here, and that we are not going to be increasing the budget once what is up here is being spent.
So that is within the understanding of that is a decision now, even though it's not all been approved. That's the implication here?
Yes.
That, to clarify, is what the amendment to the motion is, which is, again, essentially putting
So I just
two things
said no,
together,
he and
which I would have kept separate, but.
Which we can totally do.
Yeah.
So, to recap, I'm sorry, but is that saying that we're only gonna have $64,000 for the rest of the year?
If this amendment is approved and then the motion is approved, then yes, that is what is being discussed.
We won't be able to add to it at all.
That is what the motion, the amendment to the motion,
Through what request does that get us?
if we were to fund everything in full.
Yes.
There's a total of almost $66,000 on the docket.
I'm just saying, like, through the 64, like, how far down the line does that get us?
And that plus a smidgen of that last request. Just a smidgen.
So not quite half.
Alejandro.
In regards to not accepting more supplemental requests, does that include the ones that Lacey has already received?
That would be for you all to clarify, which would be the question I'd ask after we vote on the amendment to the motion.
Call the previous question.
Yeah.
Okay. Alright, so we're gonna vote on the amendment to the previous motion.
So this is voting to add, not increasing the funding to the original motion, not voting on the motion itself as clarification.
Oh.
So, all those in favor?
Add it, not that
Wait,
we're.
what?
Yes.
No, no,
Okay, should
okay.
we all vote
Point of
no
order,
or all vote
point of
yes?
order.
Like, what-
This vote is on the amendment to the original motion, asking if we should end, or no, I'm confused, sorry. No. If we should not allow any more funding, budget increases for this year.
The funding, we will not add any more funding to.
No more funding.
A yes vote means that the full motion is both. A no vote means that we go back to the original motion of just no more funding requests.
So if you vote no, it's just no more funding requests.
But it's still not voting on approving the motion, it's
No.
just voting on
Yeah.
changing the
Which
motion.
is why I don't like amendments to motion.
Alright.
Be like a scribe, you know, in the courtroom that has like a
Call the
Aubrey's
previous
trying
question.
I'm trying my best.
Call the question.
Alright, call the question. We're voting on the amendment to not receive any more voting with the justification. All those in favor? 5. Opposed?
What's your motion?
I'm just trying to go back to the original motion.
You're voting. Are you voting?
Okay, I think there's confusion.
It's just the amendment.
I'm confused.
This is just the amendment. We're not voting on whether we're not accepting anymore. This is on if we're not going to approve any more budget money this year.
Can I clarify maybe in my words?
Sure,
Okay.
go for it.
Okay, so first off, Eric came in, Eric Bennett. He said that
Mr. Eric.
we need to, he made a motion that we need to not hear anymore and let other groups know that we're not going to hear anymore. We didn't specify if that was counted Lacey's in her email or not, or just the ones here, or any future ones. And then.
No, it was just future ones.
Just
That was
future
my
ones.
motion.
Yeah,
It was
yeah,
just
but we
future
didn't-
ones.
But we didn't, okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
That was the motion.
All right.
We'll go, yep.
Now Alex Harrington said amendment, and he said he wants to add on to that, and he wants to add on to Eric Bennett's motion to say that we will not add to the budget at all, in addition to what Eric said. So now we're voting on Alex's amendment.
Yes.
Whether to attach it to Eric's original motion or
We just
not.
failed really bad on it because people were doing this. Yeah.
So I would
So
like to call for a revote.
Hold on, Greg is asking for clarification before you say.
So a yes vote now is just to say that we're stuck at $64,333 for the rest of the year.
Yes.
A no vote then shuts down the amendment, and then we would vote on Eric's
Yes.
amendment to not hear anymore.
Yes.
Not acceptable.
Eric.
I would like to call for a roll call vote on the amendment. Ask every person what their vote is, because I think there's confusion.
Okay. Alex, what is your vote?
Yay.
Josh?
Yay.
So in favor of the amendment.
In favor of the amendment, yes.
I was not in favor of it.
Cece?
I am in favor.
Greg?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
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 Okay, so that's a 7-3. So moved. And we amended the previous motion.
So now the current motion on the table is that we cease receiving any additional funding packets with the justification that we are not going to be increasing the budget beyond the remaining $64,000.
Yes. Eric?
I'd like to amend the motion.
Oh.
No. That since, but I'm going to ask one quick question. The people that are in your mailbox with their requests, have they been said yay or nay or anything, or they're just there? Have you
Have you
reviewed them
determined
yet?
that they're allowable?
Yeah.
Is that what you're asking?
Yes, because this
Have
is
you
going to.
processed them yet?
That is a very difficult question. That
Okay.
is not as close to a yes or no. There's quite a bit of vetting that needs to happen, and that's continuing to happen. But I would like to say that should not impact the requesters. So I do have questions, but I usually have questions on every single one of these requests.
So this is my motion, my amendment. I would like to, on this date, the ones that are in your mailbox for review, as long as they're allowable, they can be added to this list with the obvious understanding that,
It might not.
it might not get approved because there's no more funding, possibly.
Cece?
Question, why would we add them to the list when we can only get halfway with the 64,000? That would just make them feel like they have opportunity and they don't. And that would just, again, like was mentioned earlier, you would be wasting their time.
I
And
understand.
maybe wasting their money because they wouldn't probably get a refund.
But they've already turned it in. And they didn't know not to, so I don't.
And told them to turn it in last year.
Yes.
I guess I have two things. One, we could deny everything up until that point, and there might be funding left for them.
That's true.
But also, is it worded that if you get it in by the state, you will be heard? Or is it worded that if you want to be heard during this quarter, this is when you should get it in? Like, are we assuring them that they are going to be heard when they're submitting it?
The wording that was put out both fall and winter quarter, which was new this year, is that if they turn it in by that deadline, they will have the opportunity to present before the committee in that quarter. These are outside of that. These are not on the winter quarter.
Point of
docket.
order to the chair, the amendment, or the amendment to the motion has failed since nobody seconded
Yes.
it.
So the motion still is on the table.
For some discussion.
And I would like to call the previous question.
Does everyone remember it?
So the motion now that you all will vote on is to not receive any additional funding requests beyond what is already on here, with the justification that we will not be increasing the supplemental funding budget beyond what it currently is.
Yes. Well, we have to vote. Sorry, Dave.
It was a call to question.
Yeah. So all those in favor, what Joey said. All those opposed.
Wait.
Abstentions. Alright, the motion is denied.
Yep.
So we'll go back to just normal discussion.
Any other
Of the
budget discussion? There does not have to be a motion on anything. I'm just
Normal discussion. Dave.
I just want to say why I voted no, I guess. I felt like I see where we're coming from. I think budgets are good, yeah, but like, that's a pretty like, bear with me. Don't look at me like that. But like, this is a drastic move, we're exactly halfway through the year, so there's a lot of things that could happen, we talked about how the AC could fail and we all run out of deodorant, whatever. But I just don't want to like go down the hill and not know where the cactuses are, Like,
I like that.
I just want to be.
I'm going to the store to buy deodorant.
Great.
It's a good analogy.
So we're right where we started, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
We're right where
Nothing
we
has
started,
changed.
And,
We're
Open-ended.
and so then I can go back, because I kept wanting to ask one other question before all of this happened, because I started that thing with the AC breaking, and my follow-up to that question is, there is that, how much, 3.4 mil sitting there. It made $200,000 this year in interest.
Last year, but yeah.
Last year. So to grab 200 grand really wouldn't even change anything. But is there any other fund in the CIRC within all of this that is a reserve for maintenance and things like that? Is this the only pot of money for everything, or is there other, like 3 million here and 2 million there, that are reserves to cover some of these emergencies too?
So yes, there are two other fund groups for those reserves. So that is the student union and also the rec center. They individually have their own reserves to maintain their operations.
Josh.
Which is not at the purview of the committee.
This is my thinking, and I want to get it out there so you can correct one of the newest members on the committee. My thinking is we have a budget, and I'm putting this in terms of my own personal finance. We have a budget that we have set for the year. When that runs out, it's gone. We can then decide, do we want to go into debt or to go above or beyond our budget based on whatever unique things come up, or when they come up, rather than pre-thinking they may come up, which seems to be what we're doing with pre-making motions on what might happen in the future. These are still unknown. Once we hit a zero balance, then we can decide and vote, and you can vote yay, you can vote nay, I can abstain because it's a tough thing to vote on. Individually for any new request that comes forward. I think the challenge with that is we should, in good faith, let people know this is where the budget is now, somehow, so that they understand, and that's part of the process, is we've budgeted this. This has been a student-led process to budget that. When it comes to an end, it's at an end, and this committee votes to either go over budget or to not.
Okay.
Well, I'd just like to extend that maybe. So we did make a budget of our X amount. However, and then Greg and Lacey discussed the 200,000 that was generated through interest. So we have this extra money in a pool, but we did make a budget of what we wanted to spend on, but we still have other money that's being generated.
That's a fair point.
So, and we're here to benefit students right now, but we're also talking about, when I make people laugh, is it just like the way I look?
No, yeah.
Oh, I wasn't laughing.
You're good. I don't know. like I said before, it's pretty drastic to cut off all funds, and I think that if we're generating like $200,000, or at least we did last year, in my mind, I mean, I don't see like we don't need to like put in like, you know, let's add $200,000 to it. But I don't know. I think that money's still there to be used, and we can use it appropriately. And I mean, we should think about that.
Cece.
So kind of piggybacking off of what Josh said, is there if we get to 0, can there be like a motion to when we get to 0, we discuss if we want to do that and add or leave it? But one thing we also should, again, like let people know that, you know, getting kind of tight on the budget. But yeah, I do think that it'd be a good idea to kind of table it until we get to 0.
Or at least until next week.
Eric.
When we had the original discussion on the budget, I remember Lacey, I think I asked the question, with having a $300,000 budget this year, what it could look like for future years. And the way it stands, ostensibly could have $300,000 budgets in the future also in the discussion. And so that's something to think about. And I mean, I agree with what you say, and I agree with what you say and your addition. But I'm fearful of future committees, that there are things that happen and, you know, all the air conditioning goes out and deodorant in Ellensburg vanishes. Sorry. And that has to be fixed. And you know, here in this building there are partners, you know, Dining and Wildcat Shop are also partners and probably have their own background or emergency funds for their own contribution to fix things when that happens. But I really think we need to be mindful of where we're at. We all know a lot of people requested money earlier this year, on probably many of us suggesting that to groups that we all know. I know I did. I told everyone, request money early. You know?
And good for them. Like.
Yeah, no, good for them.
Yeah.
Right.
If we did vote to increase the budget, is that final, or does it have to go through approval and does somebody else have to say, yes, you can do that? So is there a time span there so that if we hit 0 and then we go to increase it, do we have to wait a month before it's approved? Yeah. If that's, I mean, just
So to answer that, no, because they approve the allocations that we recommend. So us setting the budget is really us internally controlling what that is and really following the recommendations of our financial manager, who's going to tell us if we're in a spot that we shouldn't be doing something. Now, the recommendations up, they don't have to with the budget. We let them know what we set. We let them know the motions, so they're aware. If it was that situation, they could just deny every vote afterwards. After that point, if that was the case, but it's not a piece we send up to request.
Wow.
I think it was Cece who said, you know, I think it would be fine to inform everyone that this is kind of where we're at, but beyond that, I think it'd be fine to table it until we decide that it needs to come up again. I don't know if that needs to be.
I did just want to have, I want to say I think it is a good plan to go ahead and communicate with everybody where we are financially at this time. And that is something that I believe myself and circuit county can do. And so if that is what the committee ends up deciding, then I think that's going to be a great plan. The other piece that Dane had said, there is a piece where, you know, we don't want to sit on funds, right? So, you know, this is probably counteracting what I've said, but there is a reason why we have these funds. It's for students. And so with whatever decision that you guys end up making, I just hope you're mindful in the impact You know, this year, this committee has constantly asked that from our supplemental requesters, is what is the impact? And so I will push that onto the committee, is if you do decide to increase the budget, what is that impact and how can you, what is the committee or the student body actually gonna get from that increase? And so yes, you guys are representatives, but you are also representing every single student, so I would just keep that in mind.
And I get to play the devil's advocate. Conversely, if we choose not to, what is the impact that that has as well? I mean, this is where I want you all to be mindful as we're having these discussions on reasons you're voting yes or no, and to communicate them amongst everyone on the committee. Josh.
So you talked about impact, and something that came up in my mind through one of the presentations is most of the presentations say something like, "We hope to do this when we return," and I just finally I was like, hope isn't a strategy. Like, is there any way to say we will approve this if you do what you say you're going to do when you come back and give back to the community? It just made me wonder if we've had those discussions, if there's any follow-up, if there's any accountability on if you're going to do something for the community that you say you're going to do you actually do it? Do you actually live stream the conference you went to? Do you actually present at source in addition to whatever those things are? And I'm not sure if we've ever, since I've been here, we haven't talked about that, but I think it should be something on a future agenda item when we're not all tired and ready to leave.
Last year, that was an idea to require, as OUR does, require them to go to source when they, you know, return from their conferences to present. Nothing happened with it, but, you know, the discussion was there.
And I think it's a great idea to have that at a future meeting. We do have the ability, and the way that would work is essentially they couldn't get their reimbursement until they've met that obligation. But we can definitely discuss that at future.
Andre? Can we have like a discussion on like consistency with voting? Like, should we just keep voting consistently as if like, you know, we say that like, people have been saying that we should vote consistently as if it was the first week. We basically have just been approving most of them for the full funding, and if that's the case, you know, should we be doing that, or should we kind of like, I don't know, I feel like it might be kind of important to look ahead at possible allocations, like for like the West Side Student Life, that's for an advisor, I believe. Is it advisor? One for 35,000?
CC.
I don't know if she's gonna clarify. But I agree with Alejandro, because I'm hearing the vote like it's the first week, and in my mind, I'm new, I know, but that's the problem. That's what I feel like that's the problem. Everyone's again just saying yes because there's money in there, and me being new, I see that as a recurring trend, and that we should be voting on if it's equitable, if it benefits Central. Those are the two things that stuck with me when I joined the committee, and I feel like, again, kind of like what Josh was saying, that we hope to do this and that, and I even mentioned to people on the committee all the other times, like, we should be checking to see if they're going to bring it back or do something, because that's just the biggest thing, is that we're supposed to be representing students. There's not 11,000 students in this room. We're it, and if they're going to a conference and that's just them for their club or for their involvement, well, I'm really excited you want it to go, but if there's no benefit to Central, then a lot of in my mind, going back, if I was virtually here in the fall, I probably would be thinking more critically on what got approved and what didn't get approved, and what funding got cut and stuff like that. I think my strong stance is that the budget is low, and now again everyone's thinking critically about how beneficial is this, and voting like it's the first week, it's the mentality that I'm feeling is, oh, we got money to spend, let's just give it to them. And I like where everyone's head is at now, in a sense, and thinking, okay, where is this money going? Is it beneficial? And that's why we like to keep it where it's at.
the discussion that the subcommittee is having is how to change that for next year, for future years, and how to evaluate funding requests, and, you know, how do we go about in the future as a committee listening to supplemental funding requests and base funding requests.
And I think once this is gone, it'll be a good opportunity for us to bring those conversations from the subcommittee to the committee as a whole and begin to parse out how we want to word that and what those criteria are. And so I don't know if it's a silver lining or just a good thing in general, but yeah, I think it'd be fine to see where we're at once we get to the bottom of this and go from there. Would it be possible for you to let people know that this is where we're at? Do we need to move for that?
I mean, so two things. One, with what you just said, we actually do have the entire year scheduled out, which includes the subcommittee, we still have program reviews and looking at all of the annual reports and supplemental questionnaires. So Lacey and I met 2 weeks ago. The entire year is booked out for this committee in terms of what we have each week on the docket, without any additional requests beyond there. That would obviously change things. The other part I would go back to is I think you all, and I want to agree with Cece here, I think you all need to be intentional and critical with that. I do think that you all have been in terms of the questions that are being asked, which is beneficial, and I think that's been consistent in the fall. That's one of the things, and obviously I know, Cece, you weren't here, so you don't know. I think that's one of the things is you all have been very good about asking those questions and looking at the larger part. I think it really, the challenge is it is up to you all. I can't tell you, but it's up to you all on what you see the most beneficial, what you see as being the most impactful to the students and to the university at large, and where we look at that. I think what and this may go back to a little bit of the question you were saying, which I don't think we're going to get an answer to because everyone at this table may have a different opinion, is how do we take these remaining 20 requests and determine, are we just going to go in order? I think some people might want to look and be like, well, I think this request towards the end might have a lot of value on here. And that's the hard part of where, when I go back and say we want to be treating these like we do at the beginning of the year because for the equity sake of it, is a group who turns something in just because their event happened to be in November should still be looked at just as critically as a group that we're looking at now. And that's kind of what I tried to stress in the fall, that we need to be looking at all of them critically. Because again, it's not necessarily a fault of those individuals, and some of them have only come to us this quarter because other funding that they thought they had, they didn't have. So not everyone on here has met our deadlines. Everyone has done these things in advance. No one on here is a last minute, hey, I forgot and it's due tomorrow, procrastinator type request on that. And so I do appreciate how critically you all have been and how thoughtful you have all been in these discussions. They're not easy ones at all when we look at it, but.
Which I guess is like the hardest part, like that's the conflict. There's only really 2 ways I see us going that makes sense and is fair for like how we pretty much started the year for the student body, which is pretty much we continue the way we did from the beginning of the year. We go until we hit 0, and we can clearly and easily justify that, is that we had pretty much the same needs and criteria for all the funds leading all the way up to this point. We allocate all our funds. Or because like I like what you're saying, Cece, but it's just hard because we really did kind of put ourselves in a corner here. Because we can say we're like start thinking critically now, but then when we start justifying like our decisions, is that exactly fair? When they think about, wait, what about these ones? And you're thinking of it this way, and now you're thinking about like our request differently due to just kind of like where our budget is now, which is a really tough spot to be in. Which is like why it's like really there's just 2 ways. It's either we go till we hit 0, where we can easily justify that and it's fair, or we do expand the budget. And so that's kind of where I see from this discussion, seeing that there's really like 2 ways to go about it. And that's where I kind of think the discussion really should be. It's just like, which kind of like path are we going to choose in this fork in the road?
Yeah.
Josh.
Would it help to set the budget for the year, but set the allocation by quarter? So it kind of distributes the allocation more equitably, and maybe you're not as Is that something we've ever thought about in the history of our process?
Yes, and we have done it. Years ago, part of the challenge was that it still became, you did all this allocation and now those requests, because it's reimbursement, they moved to winter quarter. So you're still getting the first come, first serve. It's just you're not allocating out until the next quarter.
And then,
I mean, we can think of other models within that, but it is something that was done once upon a time. But I will also say, to go back to the history, part of the challenge being, though, we have never had this many, the number, and again, having done this now 7 years, every year we've seen an increase in the number of requests and in the amount being requested. So I can tell you, even going back 3-4 years ago, being at 35 requests or 34 requests was where we were at the end of spring quarter. Now, we also didn't necessarily have this amount in those 34 requests in terms of the total dollar amount. So some of this is people becoming aware of the options. Some of it is, again, increases in cost to go to conferences or bring in programs and things. And so some of it is the monster that we created by hyping this up and making people aware that, hey, you have this option and use your money and have these things. And with changes to other things, because as we saw last year when other funding options ran out, this was the only other option available for students to go to, which meant more people who were new came last year, and same as the year before, which just meant that this was more on their radar. So we're seeing just an increase on both ends.
I'd like to tack on to that as a reminder, at the beginning of fall quarter, we had a ton of club requests come through because Club Senate was not up and running. Funds Council, now named Funds Council, it took a while for them to get going, and so the clubs really didn't have any other place to go other than S&A. And that does have an impact. It has a financial impact and also a workload impact. So
It's true. So is it likely that we'll just switch timing, so we run out of funds here, clubs will just go to the Funds Council instead until they burn up their budget?
maybe. I think that there are a lot more restrictions on the Funds Council requests, so they have certain caps, but we could potentially see that.
Greg?
It's all really great ideas floating around here right now. And I think it's meant to be more critical, to be accountable, and I think we've talked about it before. And it's like, how do you do that? Do we set aside funding? Did we actually create a position, the student position, so that person, somebody who's going to keep track? If we to see that they came back and they did source that they said they were going to, or that they did what they were going to do. That's a job right there. So we have to consider how we can do that, and then keeping track of it, so that do we say, okay, psychology club, you got funded this year, you can't ask for money next year, you've got to wait 2 years, or that, is there a way to distribute money and try to think about who, I don't know, if psychology is better than photography. It's difficult for me to compare sometimes what somebody does that's out of my field and the benefits that's coming back and how that serves. And I don't know if I can do that objectively. But wow. And so maybe we should just adjourn and move on. But
Is it like within our power to say, hey, you can only have this if you fulfill these certain things? Like, is that, we can do that?
Yes, as the committee. The question was, is it within our power to say you can have this funding only if you meet these expectations or certain things? If I ever summarize wrong, please let me know. And we do. We have the ability to say you can have this funding, but the requirement is you need to come back and present to us. I don't think we want to add everyone coming back to us. I wouldn't recommend that, just with the numbers you see. There are other groups that do that, or you have to do that. So we have the ability. These are a lot of options, which I think is important for us to discuss, and this is what's on the docket for spring quarter, is some of these larger pieces for us to look at. Given where they're at, and I would entertain, since I can't make a motion, that we're having a good discussion. I don't think it's anything that is going to be determined tonight. And I think it's stuff that I think would be beneficial for people to think about, given that we're not at a spot, even if we fund everything next week, that we're going to be out. that I think it would be beneficial to potentially continue this discussion next week as people have thought about more of where we are. Since and it's a lot of good feedback, a lot of very thoughtful and intentional conversation. But I can also see that we're not going to get to an end result tonight. And so instead of us all staying here till midnight chatting, I would entertain that we table this until next week.
And then just before I recognize that, yeah, just like with that said, I know we kind of went into a lot of what ifs, but really just think about it over the week. Is this, do we want to expand it? Do we not? And then we think about how we're going to approach it that way when we make that decision, instead of kind of going into our what ifs, because we can totally hit the criteria stuff with the subcommittee and all that, but I think right now we just need to think about the decision that's in front of us. Eric?
I'd like to make a motion to table this discussion
Absolutely.
until next week.
Dan, you second?
Here.
Discussion?
Do we know when's the subcommittee gonna report next?
Well, we're meeting, well, Edgar's not here.
Well, when are we meeting next? Haven't seen it.
We can ask for an update from Edgar next week.
Okay,
So-
fine.
Yeah.
I'll put it on the agenda.
Yeah, but right now the subcommittee's going through the questionnaires that they received from all the base funded areas, and they're gonna kind of think about pretty much how they're gonna make a criteria for base funded areas, and then definitely tackling supplemental is on there too for the subcommittee. But yeah, all those in favor of tabling until next week? Opposed? Abstentions? So moved. We'll move on to the next part of the agenda, which is other business, communications received. I haven't received any. You haven't? No. Public comment, second call. Open up to the galley.
I'd like to
I have a
read.
public comment.
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you all for being diligent in your efforts to discuss this and take the time to do the right thing and make great decisions. And thank you for serving our students.
Any other public comment?
I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
It's a motion, Jeff seconds. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? So moved.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
See you next week.